Hello, friends. This is another episode of the program Empire of Lies, in which we talk about manipulation and disinformation of the Russian media, Europe as a convenient enemy. The Vladivostok Eastern Economic Forum, which the hosts of the program Big Game talked about with pathos, once again became an arena for demonstrating the Kremlin's geopolitical fantasies. Russia, according to Putin and his mouthpieces, does not turn anywhere, but is supposedly naturally present everywhere, in the east, west, south and north. Europe in this narrative is depicted as nothing more than a secondary passenger in the global process, deprived of will, deprived of a future, doomed to become a wagon, dragging behind the locomotive of Moscow and Beijing. This image is presented to millions of Russians as a new truth. And this is not just a television entourage, it is an ideological attempt to convince the population. Europe has lost, Europe is isolated, Europe is tired. Europe as a target and a backdrop. In the studio of the Big Game, they say that any attempt to send Western troops to Ukraine will turn them into legitimate targets. The rhetoric is straightforward, brutal, and deliberately threatening. Such statements work as an instrument of psychological pressure. The European viewer is shown the image of Russia ready to destroy and punish. And the Russian viewer is convinced that peace with Moscow is possible only on its terms. The pipeline as a weapon, Asia as salvation. It is no coincidence that so much attention is paid to the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline. On air, it is called the largest project in the history of mankind. The economic project is presented as a symbol of political triumph. Europe is lost, but China will save it. This should instill a simple idea. We do not need Europe, we have Asia. However, vulnerability is hidden behind this window. Russia is turning into a raw materials appendage of China, and China politely accepts this gift, strengthening its own influence. The Kremlin presents this as equal cooperation, but for the European reader, it is obvious. There is no equality here, there is dependence. Civilization versus law. The hosts of the program like to repeat, Russia is a civilization. It would seem to be a beautiful formula, but in reality it means a rejection of universal norms. If Russia is a separate civilization, then international law is not binding for it, and decisions are made according to concepts. For Europe, this is a key signal. Moscow is not looking for a dialogue based on rules. It is looking for recognition of its exceptionalism. And this means that any concession from the EU will be interpreted not as a compromise, but as a capitulation. That is, the result of the attempt to isolate Russia was the isolation of Europe itself. This is a very understandable change in trend, because in fact the fact that Russia is restoring Soviet capital, which was based on good relations, mutual trust, awareness of mutual interests with a huge number of Asian countries, is precisely a return, firstly, to a very understandable system of coordinates, a very successful system of coordinates, because the Soviet Union had heroic, interesting and profitable episodes connected with Asia, and they were very well implemented. And the restoration of balance, which will now be based not only on the western-eastern vector, but also in the south, that is, on 3 points of support, is probably the most reliable of those possible structures. Europe in their mirror and real Europe-Russian propaganda paints Europe as decrepit, isolated and incompetent. This is a caricature designed for a domestic viewer. But the danger is that such images gradually form the idea among millions of Russians that Europe is no longer a subject of politics. It is important for us, Europeans, to understand. This is the picture that is becoming the basis for justifying war today. In this mirror, we are weak, divided, voiceless. The broadcast of The Great Game is a performance where Russia portrays itself as the center of civilization and Europe as its past. But this performance is dangerous because people believe in it. The European response cannot be silent. We need not only to expose, but also to offer rules to the world, protection to neighbors, confidence to citizens. Because if Europe allows itself to be dictated to by the role of an extra, then very soon this role will become reality. And reality written by someone else's hands is rarely fair. You were on the program Empire of Lies. See you soon.